Hello fellow flight simulation enthusiasts, welcome to another episode on how to fly a helicopter in a sim. Today we are going to look at the hover. Now hovering is probably the most important skill if you want to learn to fly a helicopter, and it's also the most difficult thing for beginners. You need to train your muscle memory, and you need to learn to coordinate all the flight controls to be constantly balancing out a rather unstable aircraft. To make matters worse, it can be even harder in a simulator to hover a helicopter due to the lack of sensory inputs. Other than in real life, we cannot rely on our gut feeling or our sense of balance to actually feel where the aircraft is going. And if you're like me and you're looking at a flat computer screen, we cannot make use of our peripheral vision to enhance our situational awareness. However, if you use VR goggles, that might help with the latter point. Personally, I haven't tried it out. My system is maxed out as it is right now. But maybe in the future, who knows. Now in this video, I'm going to cover a few things that hopefully will make it easier for you to master the hover. First thing is understanding the correlation or relationship between your collective and your anti-torque pedals. The second thing is understanding that the helicopter behaves or acts like a pendulum suspended below the rotor disc. And the last thing is understanding how to use the Cyclic to find what I call the hover sweet spot and understand the concept of nudge and recenter. I'm also going to show and explain to you what a pilot-induced oscillation is and how you can stop them. Quick word about controls. You will need a decent joystick for your Cyclic. You should have a set of rudder pedals and should also use something as a collective. Now you can use the sliding lever on your main joystick, but I highly recommend to get some form of real collective. I mean, I personally have a replica of a Bell 206 collective, but right now I'm not at home, so I have my mobile setup, which mainly consists of a modified, very cheap the computer joystick. I just removed the center springs and I tied some rubber bands in it, so the x-axis is actually not operable, so I only have the y-axis, and I use this as a collective. And I also recommend that you would position your controls where you would actually find them in the real aircraft. Another thing that you should be aware of is frame rates. If your frame rates in the simulator are too low, you are not going to be successful in controlling and hovering a helicopter. That is because, as I said, we mainly rely on visual inputs while trying to control the helicopter. Now, if these visual inputs are somewhat delayed by low frame rates, you are not going to be able to control it. So make sure that you have decent frame rates. To me, anything from 25 up is manageable. The higher, the better. For your hover practice, I would recommend choosing an aircraft that is rather stable and forgiving. We are using the R44 today. I also recommend Cowenson's Bell 222 or Dreamfoil's Schweitzer 300. If you're in DCS, I recommend, of course, the UH1 by Bell Syntec and the MI8 by Bell Syntec as well. A helicopter is an unstable aircraft, so if there's no control input from you, it will start to move. Therefore, if you want to keep the helicopter in a hovering state above a certain spot, you will need to constantly make small corrective control inputs to counteract the tendency of the helicopter to move in any direction. Focusing your eyes on a distant spot or object will make it easier for you to maintain a hover. Looking down at the ground right in front of your helicopter will increase the tendency to overcorrect and get into pilot-induced oscillations. So let's talk about torque. The main rotors are spinning into an anti-clockwise direction in this helicopter, and the rapidly spinning rotors exert a force on the fuselage of the helicopter that causes it to turn into the other direction, into the opposite direction, which is to the right. This is called torque, or the torque effect, and we have our anti-torque pedals to oppose that force. I'm demonstrating this here. I'm pulling collective without any pedaling, and you can see the helicopter starts to spin rapidly to the right until I push in left pedal. Vice versa, if I lower collective, the torque effect gets less. And if I keep the pedal position that I have right now, about halfway, the helicopter's nose will start spinning to the left again. So whenever I lower collective, I need to ease off on the left or power pedal, or I might even have to push in some right pedal. I'm just getting a little attitude here to show this effect to you. I'm keeping the pedals as they are, so left pedal in, and as I let go of collective, you can see the helicopter spinning to the left. Now, understanding that principle means that you should understand that whenever you're pulling collective or pulling more power from the engine, torque effect gets stronger, and you should push in some left pedal or power pedal. And whenever you lower the collective, torque effect gets less, and you can ease off on the left pedal or might even have to push in some right pedal. In the hover, we use the pedals to keep the nose pointed in the direction that we want, so in this case, straight ahead. The next thing to understand is that the fuselage of the helicopter is suspended below the large rotor disc, and it actually behaves like a pendulum, or acts like a pendulum. I'm going to show you something here. If I push the nose a little bit forward, we can see the helicopter gaining speed, but after a short while it pitches up and that speed is lost. So it basically swings back, and that's important to understand. So if you want to keep the helicopter going forward, you need to do your corrective control inputs to stop it from swinging back up again and stopping. Now, as I hover along this taxiway here, I'm going to show you that if I want to keep that forward momentum, I need to nudge the cyclic forward ever so often to stop the aircraft from swinging back and stopping. Now I'm going to show you how to stop the movement again. You need to pull back on the stick. However, one important tip, you pull back on the stick, and right before the aircraft stops, you recenter the stick to that hovering sweet spot position. Now, if you don't do that, the following will happen. I'm going to show you. Now I'm pulling aft on the stick, but I don't return it to center. And what will happen is the aircraft pitches up and suddenly gains aft movement. That's what we don't want. So just before the aircraft stops, you should recenter the stick. And that's the now I'm going to explain that hovering sweet spot thing that I keep talking about. So the hovering sweet spot is basically the cyclic position in which the helicopter is balanced out. It changes a little bit depending on the C of G, but it's usually not in the absolute center of your cyclic throw or of the little crosshair in the left bottom corner. It is usually a little bit aft and left, or aft right, depending on your helicopter that you fly. So in order to keep a steady hover, I need to keep the cyclic in that hovering sweet spot position, and then I have to do constant small control inputs opposing the direction that the helicopter wants to drift to or move to. And when I do these small corrective inputs, I should always remember to return the center back to that sweet spot position. That's what I mean by nudge and recenter. You nudge the helicopter where you want it, and then you recenter the stick. Now I'm going to show you the pendulum effect again with lateral movement. If I nudge the helicopter to one side, it will naturally swing back to the other. So in order to get lateral movement, I need to push in a little bit left pedal so the nose doesn't turn, and then I keep nudging the cyclic to the right in this case, and recenter. Now, with this understanding, it should be easier for you to anticipate what the aircraft will do, and that of course makes it easier to keep a steady hover or do proper hover taxi work. Now let's talk about PIOs, the pilot-induced oscillations. This happens if you push the stick forward. You want to, let's say you want to stop the helicopter from moving. You push aft on the stick, but you hold it there a little too long so it swings back. You push the stick forward again. It starts forward movement, and you push the stick aft again, and so on and so on. You keep swinging. This is a pilot-induced oscillation. Now this happens to everyone every now and then, especially in a sim, so it's important to know how to stop a PIO. There are two ways to stop PIO. The first one is opposing cyclic input. Now that we know that the helicopter is like a pendulum, it should be easy to stop that swinging motion. In a second you will see the helicopter pitch up, but before it swings back, I'm going to stop that pendulum motion by two rather aggressive aft inputs on the cyclic. That way I put a stop to the pendulum motion of the helicopter and stop the PIO. Let's look at it again. The only thing I'm doing is using my cyclic input to stop a POI from developing by opposing the tendency of the helicopter to swing back and forth. The second and most natural way to put a stop to a PIO is basically doing nothing. Now, if you're in a hover and you find yourself swinging, just stop over controlling and leave the cyclic in the sweet spot position. I'm going to show that to you now. I'm starting to get into that swinging motion, but this time I'm going to do nothing. Now, of course, I kept the helicopter straight and level in the hovering sweet spot, but you can see that after a few swings, so to speak, the helicopter naturally returns to its original state. So that's the second way of stopping a PIO. Just do nothing. Don't overcorrect. So I think these were the points that I wanted to show you. I hope you learned something. I hope they help you to get proficient in the hover. And yeah, stay tuned for the next episodes, which will be climb, cruise, and descent, and touchdown. So thanks for joining in, and see you around.